Today, more from Kent, that county that I recently said I feel I have been neglecting a bit. This is a very well-known producer. Is it possibly the single biggest English sparkling wine producer, or certainly in the top three? Chapel Down. I've probably said before, I'm not really a huge fan of their regular output, their sort of standard, what do they call it, classic cuvee, whatever it is, the sort of base level white English sparkling they do, non-vintage. But in the past, I have quite enjoyed some of the far pricier special releases from this single vineyard, Kit's Coty. They made what I suppose is called a prestige cuvee from there. It was called something like the Core de Cuvée, the heart of the blend. And that retailed a while back for £100+. It was very pricey by English sparkling standards. And I like that. I thought that was very good. This is not that. This is a sort of more budget version of that. So it's from the same vineyard, single vineyard. I think it's Blanc de Blanc's all Chardonnay, but it's the rest of the cuvées. So I suppose they pick the absolute best grapes, put them in the very pricey wine, and then everything else from that vineyard ends up in this, unless it goes on to some of the other blends, I don't know. I don't think I've had exactly this before then. I've had the fancier version, the expensive fancy version, and I was kind of hoping this might give something of that same feel without being quite as pricey. I should add as a disclaimer, I actually have shares in Chapel Down, not in any serious quantity, but you know, I have often said I don't particularly like some of their wines, so hopefully you could take my opinion seriously. They at one time had an offer for shareholders whereby you'd get a discount on all their products, and there was a short-lived bar in King's Cross, a Chapel Down bar, which is no longer there, alas. One of the very few more or less dedicated English wine bars at that time. There are none now in London. So I bought those shares so that I could get a discount on the wines there, and then only ever ended up going twice. And the shares are now worth a tiny fraction of what I paid for them. So all in all, a bit of a poor investment, I think. Did I say yet this is a 2017 vintage? I have visited this vineyard, not on a proper wine tour, on one of the other channels, on Tweedy Outdoors, because there is a dolmen there, a Neolithic dolmen, a former site of a burial chamber that was part of a long barrow. Kit's Coty, which is where the name of the vineyard comes from. So let's start by taking a look at the colour. As one might expect for a Blanc de Blanc, it's pretty pale gold. On the nose, I'm initially met with almost slightly candied apple. Quite a pleasant aroma, not in a confected artificial way, but in the sweeter end of apple. That possibly make it kind of red apple-like there, and that's quite pleasant. Not a lot of autolytic character to begin with. It's mostly that one fruit note, but it's nice. It's not a bad start. There's something else behind that slightly candied apple there, almost a tiny bit floral. That's an unusual thing to find. Could be my imagination. That is not messing about. On the palate, quite intense, very zingy, more green apple, crunchy acidity there. I would say precise in the sense of it knows what it's doing, and it's doing it in a very specific way. It's not confused about what it's trying to express. Green apple zing. The balance there is rather lovely. On some level it's pretty dry, but there is a hint of sweetness. Again, that sort of candied apple-like note, and a nice bit of zing to carry that all along. Quite a nice mouthfeel from the bubbles there. It's a good one to slosh over the tongue. Interesting, lingering finish there. Almost a tiny hint of something spice-like or tannin-like, which is very unusual for a Chardonnay and a sparkling wine. Neither of those things seem what you might expect in this style of wine. I wonder, has this possibly had some oak influence? I think they were doing a bit of that at some point. Does it tell me anything on the back? Well, it says partial barrel fermentation, so I assume that has had a little bit of wood contact. And I'm getting this ever so slightly gentle, certainly not out of place or spoiling the rest of the experience, but a very gentle nuance of something almost tannin-like. Very interesting. Normally not a big fan of tannins. I think they have no place usually in sparkling wine, but here it gives it a bit of grip and a bit of structure. I actually kind of like that, to my surprise. There is talk on the back of fresh apples. Well, we've definitely found fresh apples, although I thought they were slightly candied, but not in a bad way. And buttery pastry. That's the thing I'm not quite getting yet, having earlier this week tasted that Hambledon, and that very much fit this description actually. Maybe the pastry's there, but it's subtle. If I'm being generous, I might say that it's just very well integrated into the fruit. You can't really notice it. I'm pretty happy with that, actually. That is nice. Perhaps not quite as outstanding as that Cour de Cuvée version, the really expensive version of this, but that's what you'd expect. You know, I think they have made a meaningful difference by being very selective with getting the absolute best bunches into that blend and then the rest into this one. But it's obviously a good site. You know, if this is the B-side to that, the ones that didn't make the cut for the Prestige Cuvée, then it's, you know, still pretty good terroir, pretty good grapes coming out of there. Perhaps isn't quite as intense. I think that's the thing I remember particularly about the Cour de Cuvée, was that it was really, really intense, that sort of appley pastry. That definitely exhibited some pastry, really kind of really intense. This is a little bit more laid back and relaxed, but still very pleasant, very drinkable. I like that. I think that is a win. I will update my overall verdict on Chapel Down. I think, you know, some of their base level blends, and in fact they even have a wine where they just make a still wine and then add CO2. And they're very clear that that is the case. They're not trying to pass that off as a traditional method wine, but they do some stuff at the more mass market level, which, to be honest, I think is letting the side down a little bit. But when they really make an effort to do something a bit special, this single vineyard wine, or its more expensive brother, cousin, sister, whatever you want to call it, then I think they are capable of actually making some really nice wine. So it's just, I guess, a question for them of trying to get the market positioning right or something like that. But that is certainly very good and something I would happily have again. Cheers.